It's important that we believe in a historical Adam and Eve for several reasons, but one is the Bible presents the story of Adam and Eve as a historical narrative. It reports this as literature telling events that actually happened. Several reasons indicate that. First, the story of Adam and Eve is placed at the beginning of the Bible. It's a story that is embedded in the narrative of how the universe came into being, where the sun and moon and stars came from, where the planets came from, where the waters and the land on earth came from, where the fish came from, where the animals came from, and ultimately where human beings came from. The whole initial narrative of the Bible is a story of the origins of living things. And that shows an indication that this is an explanation of how these various things began, including an explanation of how the human race began. Then that impression is reinforced by the fact that the story of Adam and Eve is tied into later chapters in the Bible with genealogies and names, so that Adam and Eve had children. They had Cain and Abel, and then Seth's descendants are listed. And later in Genesis, those who descended from Seth are also listed, and so the human race progresses. So the Genesis 1 to 3 is tied in the narrative to later historical events, going on to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, etc. Then there's a literary feature. In Genesis 2:4, in the ESV, it says, "These are the generations of the heavens and the earth." But some translations say this is the account of, but in Hebrew there's an expression that is repeated 11 times in Genesis. These are the generations of, these are the generations of, and it structures the whole book of Genesis, going all the way to the story of Jacob and Jacob's 12 sons, so that is, of course, real history, the origin of the nation of Israel and the 12 tribes. But that structure, these are the generations of, ties the entire book together as clearly a historical narrative. Then you go later in the Old Testament, and the book of 1 Chronicles. If you've ever read Chronicles, you know it's just long chapters of lists of names. But where does it start? It starts with Adam and then Seth, and goes forward from there till you get into the detailed history of the people of Israel. There are other arguments from the Hebrew syntactical structure that would indicate that this is intended as historical narrative. I won't go into those at this point, but there's another argument, and that is when we go to the New Testament views Adam and Eve as real historical people. In fact, when I researched this, I found 10 New Testament books that treat Adam and Eve as historical people. For instance, in Matthew 19, Jesus says, "He who created them from the beginning," that's an allusion to Genesis 1, "he who created them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh." That's quoting Genesis 2. So Jesus alludes to Genesis 1, he quotes Genesis 2, and he takes it as a historical narrative. We go over to the book of Luke, and Luke traces the genealogy of Jesus all the way back to the son of Enos, the son of Seth, the son of Adam, the son of God. In other words, in Luke 3, Luke is tracing the genealogy of the human race all the way back to Adam, who was the son of no human being, but the son directly of God. Paul, when he's speaking to Greek philosophers on the Areopagus in Athens, says in Acts 17, God made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth. And elsewhere, Paul calls Adam the one man in the book of Romans, for instance. So Paul is talking about Adam and saying that every nation of mankind has descended from Adam. Adam is taken as historical. 1 Corinthians 15:45, Paul says, "The first man, Adam, became a living being." And so Adam is called the first man, understood as historical. So there is abundant evidence that Genesis 1 to 3 should be understood as truthful historical narrative. There's another reason why it's important to insist on the historicity of Adam and Eve as they are represented in Genesis 1 to 3, and that is the truthfulness of the Bible itself is at stake. If we deny the factual history of Adam and Eve as reported in Genesis 1 to 3, we're denying the truthfulness of a major section of the Bible, and I think that's really denying the inerrancy of Scripture, which is a major doctrinal deviation. But that's not all. These first 3 chapters of the Bible are tremendously important. They are chapters that provide the historical foundation for the rest of the Bible and for the entirety of the Christian faith. So this means that the debate over creation and evolution is really a debate about the validity of several major Christian doctrines for which these 3 chapters are foundational. When you think about it, in Genesis 1 to 3, the Bible teaches essential truths about the activity of God in creation, the origin of the universe, the creation of plants and animals on the earth, the origin and unity of the human race, the creation of manhood and womanhood, the origin of marriage, the origin of human sin and human death, and the origin of man's need for redemption from sin. Without the foundation laid down in those 3 chapters, the rest of the Bible would make no sense, and many of those doctrines would be undermined or lost. And so I think it's no exaggeration to say that these 3 chapters are essential to the rest of the Bible.